Thank you everyone for attending tonight's event. This is our first event of 2021 for the Centre for Welsh Studies. We've got a great lineup here this evening to talk about Brexit and its effects on Wales and what's going to happen going forward, and the trade deal that's been ratified. We have, as I said, a great lineup with Dr. Matt Beech, the Right Honourable David Jones MP, and Nathan Gill. I'll give you a quick description of our three panellists. Once that's done, I will give them 5 to 7 minutes and I will give them an opening question. Once they've all had a little talk about that question and a little discussion, we will pop into question and answer session from the audience. So first up, we've got Dr. Matt Beech. Dr. Beech is a political scientist and historian who teaches post-war British political history, government and ideas in the Department of Politics at the University of Hull, where he's the director of the Centre for British Politics. He is Senior Fellow at UC Berkeley's Institute of European Studies, and the research centre he leads is partnered with Berkeley's Centre for British Studies. Dr. Beech has served 2 terms as an elected member of the Executive Committee of the American Political Science Association's British Politics Group. Next up, we have the Right Honourable David Jones MP. David became Member of Parliament for Clwyd West in 2005, and in 2012, he was appointed Secretary of State for Wales under David Cameron's coalition government. He served as Secretary of State for nearly 2 years until July 2014. David was appointed Minister of State to the Department of Exit in the European Union under Theresa May after playing a significant role throughout the Brexit campaign. Since 2020, he has served as the Deputy Chairman of the ERG. And last but not least, we have Nathan Gill, who's a former member of the European Parliament. Nathan was elected as UKIP MEP for Wales at the 2014 European elections. In the light of this success at the 2014 elections, Nathan was made UKIP leader in Wales. In 2016, he was elected as an Assembly member, which is now the Senedd in Cardiff Bay. And in 2019, he was re-elected as an MEP at the European elections, this time for the Brexit Party. So that's an overview of our panel. The opening question to Dr. Matt Beech, and you've got 5 to 7 minutes to explain this and what you think about it. And then I'll move on to the other panelists, is in light of the UK-EU trade deal being ratified, do you feel this deal is a win for the people of Wales and the wider British Union?
Well, thank you so much, Matt, for inviting me. It's great to be part of the Centre for Welsh Studies webinar, and in this first webinar of 2021. And it's super to be on a panel with David and with Nathan. So thank you very much. I think that leaving the European Union and the entire federal project and the concomitant rationalities of European federalism is a very positive thing for the United Kingdom in general. Why? Well, I'm afraid I would just go back to the pretty tried and tested, line of thinking around sovereignty, meaning that the 650 women and men that we elect every 5 years, that they are now meaningfully sovereign, and that no parliament binds its successor, and that the largest party in parliament forms a government, and that government can be held to account, not just through the opposition, but by the people at the ballot box every 5 years. And that also another reason would be that our Supreme Court is the final court of order and judgment in the land. And I think also that we get to choose our own immigration policy, and we get to spend taxpayers' money as Her Majesty's government sees fit. So I think leaving the European Union is good for the people of the United Kingdom. Specifically, let's turn to Wales. Well, I think and I think this is perhaps where I might take a slightly different view than my colleagues. I'm more cautious economically in the short term. I would hope that doing deals, we've done 60 odd deals. We've got the deal with the EU, which is obviously very important. We need to do good deals with the other big three, America, China, India. I know at various stages of development, lots of good work has been done by the Department of International Trade, obviously, but it's in development. I would hope that increased foreign investment into Wales would help reduce Welsh unemployment. When we look at the unemployment figures in Wales, at the moment, the Office of National Statistics tell us right now that the Welsh unemployment is 4.6%. UK unemployment is 4.9. Now, Welsh unemployment has gone up and has actually disproportionately the Welsh people have disproportionately suffered under the pandemic because it's gone up from 2.7% in May. So, and that's partly because of the proportion of Welsh people in tourism and in hospitality. And so it's a difficult position for Wales at the minute, but still that unemployment level is not the whole story, because it hides, like all our unemployment figures, the level of economic inactivity. And that is quite stubborn in some parts of Wales, as it is in parts of England and Northern Ireland and Scotland. Together with that, I would say the other thing that's concerning, and I'm positive about Britain leaving the EU, is perhaps with slightly less regulation, you might see, and I think we ought to see, and we need to see in Wales, an increase in the amount of private business. There's only 209,000 free enterprises in Wales, so it has quite low business density within the United Kingdom, and it's only, the number of business densities only increased in the last sort of 10 or 11 years by approximately 9%, and that's partly because there's 27% of Welsh workers are employed by the public sector. So what I'm hoping is an increase in foreign investment due to free trade deals may increase the level of employment, reduce unemployment. But I'm hoping that with slightly less regulation, and I'm not against, I'm for the market economy, but I think we need sensible regulation. And regulations have to be looked at piece by piece, line by line. So I'm for a market economy, but I think we need sensible regulations of labour laws and for standards and everything. I'm hoping that in the next 5-10 years, you'll see an encouragement of small to medium enterprises throughout the United Kingdom, but especially in Wales. Why, Dr. Beech? Why are you saying that? Well, to be perfectly honest, 99% of people who are employed in the private sector are employed, regardless of which sector they're in, are employed by small and medium enterprises. It's actually small business, not the big headline business. It's not your Amazons or your big car manufacturers that are absolutely central to the economy in the United Kingdom. What is central to the United Kingdom and to Wales and to small communities is small businesses, a proliferation. So I'm hoping, my aspiration is that we'd see many more people either through using digital technologies or in the high street, opening up small businesses to increase the level of free enterprise in Wales. All I would say to that, now I've thrown all these stats at you, all I'd say, I do think Wales has some difficulties, like elsewhere in the UK. I mean, the northeast of England has many difficulties. Again, it has low level of private business. I think Wales has some difficulties, like some other parts of the UK. I think the Cardiff and the Vale of Glamorgan-centric nature of the Welsh economy is problematic. I also think they, like other parts of, and I live in the East Riding of Yorkshire, and so it's similar up here. I think we need government infrastructure investment into roads and also into rural broadband, improving high-speed connectivity of rural broadband. If you want more businesses across Wales, if you want a more balanced Welsh economy rather than just in a big hub, the kind of like the London-esque hub, which Cardiff tends to be, you need better broadband and infrastructure. So I think there can be partnership between private business and the state for those sorts of things, and I think that's sensible. But I'm hopeful that over the long term, you will see many small businesses because of less regulation and hopefully higher levels of foreign investment. But that is dependent, Matthew. That is dependent on the quality of trade deals that we do. That's what I'd say.
Brilliant, that's great. Thank you, Dr. Beech. Just so you know now, your camera should be working for when you ask any questions in the future. Fantastic. There you are. David, would you like to go next?
Yes, thanks very much, Nathan. It's very good to be here too. And it's nice actually to be able to see everybody else at last. I of course, have been a great enthusiast for Brexit for many years. And interestingly, it's just over 5 years since the European Union referendum bill was passed in the Commons. So it's been a 5-year long slog to get to the position where we are now, which is for the first time in almost half a century, an independent country in charge of its own destiny. So I think that we've got a lot to look forward to. one of the things that I objected to about the European Union was that it was a very inward-looking entity. The European Union was not an expansive internationalist project. It was very much a project of building up an economic tariff barrier around the countries of Europe, and effectively doing as much as possible to keep out the rest of the world. Consequence is that we have artificially high prices, and we also have, I think, a non-internationalist outlook. The United Kingdom has always been a very internationalist country in outlook, and I remember when, well, I don't remember personally, but when de Gaulle was invited to agree to the UK joining what was then the common market, he famously applied the veto and said, if the United Kingdom, or if England, as he put it, is asked to choose between Europe and the open sea, she will always choose the open sea. And quite frankly, I think that's right. That is where our destiny lies, just as where our history lies. There's a huge amount to look forward to at the moment. And one of the most important things that we've been doing over the past 12 months, since we officially left the European Union and before leaving the transition period, is to make sure that we've rolled over as many free trade deals as possible with other countries around the world. Well, we've struck so far, as Matt said, approximately 62, I think, free trade agreements since the end of January last year. But that's not where it ends. A great prize, of course, would be to conclude a free trade agreement with the United States. But arguably, just as exciting a prospect is to apply for membership of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, because there is no doubt that the trend, the growing trend, is that international trade will be focusing on the dynamic economies of the Pacific and the Far East. And these are the countries who offer, I think, more prospect for expansion of trade for this country than many others in the world. And an interesting benefit of that too would be this: if we did, in fact, join the CPTPP, it's more than likely that with the new Biden presidency, we would be joined by the United States, because of course it was Donald Trump who decided not to proceed with US membership of the CPTPP. And I think Biden wants to change that. So that would, if you like, give us access to the US market by the back door. So far as Wales is concerned, I think that the trade and cooperation agreement that was concluded on Christmas Eve does hold out benefits for Wales. It is actually closer to a free trade agreement than any relationship we've ever had with the European Union. To repeat, the European Union is not a free trade area at all, despite what its proponents say. It's a customs union, or to put it more crudely, it's a cartel. And we were told repeatedly by the Remain campaign that there was no way that we could have access to the EU single market unless we were a full member of the European Union, making our contributions to their budget and adhering to their regulations. In fact, that was all abandoned back in December. We now have got access to the EU single market. We have quota-free, tariff-free trade with the EU, and we're not paying a penny to their budget. So what's not to like? One of the matters I was concerned about as we were approaching the end of the negotiations was this, and that was if we didn't conclude a free trade agreement with the EU, there was no doubt that sheep farmers would have been probably the most penalized sector of the entire economy, certainly of the agricultural economy. And of course, North Wales is heavily dependent upon sheep farming. The good news about the agreement that was concluded is that our farmers now have tariff-free access to the EU market, but they can also expand their markets throughout the rest of the world. And in fact, I recently had discussions with the NFU and suggested that they approach the United Arab Emirates, which of course is a country with huge consumption of sheep meat, as indeed are most of the countries of the Middle East. This is a market that we can now exploit, and it would have been so much more difficult for us to do so as members of the EU. We should also not forget the impact of the UK Internal Market Bill, or the UK Internal Market Act, as it will be. That provides that the United Kingdom government can, for the first time, for a very long time, invest directly in Welsh infrastructure. So I very much hope to see, and I can assure you that the increased numbers of Welsh Conservative MPs will make it their business to ensure that it comes to pass. But I want to see the United Kingdom government investing in Welsh roads and the railways in Wales directly. I want to see the transport infrastructure being boosted, and also digital infrastructure, which is going to be so crucial to Wales. The other thing that I would say too is that North Wales, of course, is really part of the North British economic sub-region. And one of the things that I and some of my colleagues are doing is, with the members of the Northern Research Group, lobbying the government for more government investment in the north of Britain, including the relocation of civil servants to the and whole government departments to the north of Britain. So there's no reason at all why a major government department should not move, for example, to Colwyn Bay, which I personally would welcome highly. So I think that we're on the brink of a very exciting chapter in our history. But most importantly, even taking into account all the advantages, all the economic advantages that I believe that we are going to reap, I think the most important aspect of all of our departure from the European Union is that we will be a self-governing nation state once again. We will have restored sovereignty to this country. And I think that when you look at some of the comments that are made about sovereignty in the European Union, where President Macron refers disparagingly to what he calls sovereignism, as if it's a particularly unpleasant disease, I think we will understand why we never fitted in the European Union, why we were always semi-detached, and why, at long last, we are probably in the right place in our relationship with them. Good neighbours, trading with them freely, but governing ourselves and not governed by Brussels.
Great, thank you, David. I'm sure I speak for all of the audience to say that having both an academic and a member of Parliament speak so positively about Brexit and the opportunity for Wales is long overdue. I don't think really there's been an option to be having this sort of discussion until now. A lot of the Welsh political establishment have had such a negative attitude towards Brexit. It's just really good we're being able to have this here tonight. Nathan Gill, up to you now.
Yeah, so I think one of the main things that struck me was the fact that, you know, we are positive. We're positive people. We had faith in our nation. We had faith in our future. And that's why we were Brexiteers. That's why we fought so hard and for so long in order to get back what David rightly said is our sovereignty. And, you know, Matthew MacKinnon, I remember when we spoke at the event at Bangor Cathedral. Now, it was supposed to be at Bangor University, but the university wouldn't allow us to speak there. So we had to have a referendum event at the cathedral instead. It was standing room only, literally. The cathedral has not been that full for a very long time. When we finished, a group of students came over to speak to me. And I should point out, Matthew MacKinnon spoke at this event as well. You may remember it. And so a bunch of students came over to speak to me. And they said, we've decided we're going to vote for Brexit. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. I said, what was it that made you change your mind? And they said, the positivity. And I think that is the key to all of this. You know, I went to an event just after the referendum, the Farmers Union of Wales, or one of the farmers unions, had it on Anglesey, and it was full of sheep farmers. And we were chatting away. They all said to me that they'd voted for Brexit. I said, well, that's great. Why did you all vote for Brexit? And they said, because we're in our late 70s. We can remember what it was like before we joined the EU, and we want our children to be able to farm in similar circumstances. And I just think our Victorian forefathers never saw problems, they saw possibilities. That is what we now have. We have a wonderful, amazing opportunity. We, unfortunately, are governed by a very socialist government in Cardiff right now. They're a little bit more left, actually, than the Labour Party, the UK Labour Party are. And they're the ones who are putting up the barriers. Now, I've spent 6 years of my life in the EU as a member of the European Parliament. Whenever there was an issue or a problem, the response was always, we need more EU. We need more control. We need more laws. You know, the financial crisis, the immigration crisis, whatever the problems were, the answer was always more EU, more regulation. And I'm afraid Cardiff Bay is no different. They themselves see that their answer, their solution to every single issue and problem are more laws and regulations and red tape. And that's the one thing that stops investment. You know, so David mentioned about the common market. People forget that we've been in a common market for 200 years. The United Kingdom is the most successful common market in the world, where England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, or at one point, all the whole of Ireland, you know, and Wales have traded together on a common basis. We didn't put up barriers. We had a level playing field throughout. Why is it that the Welsh government now wish to diverge Wales from this common market? They didn't want to diverge from the European common market. They were quite happy for Brussels to whatever regulations for them to bring in, but they are so keen to diverge from the common market that we're all a part of. Now, this does concern me and this does worry me, because if I was investing millions of pounds in Britain and I could see that Wales was going down this route, I'd probably just stick to sticking my money in England. You know, we've got to make ourselves, Wales must make itself extremely attractive. We have the opportunities. We saw just recently that the new Land Rover Defender, it's not actually made by Land Rover, it's made by a multi-millionaire who set up a company to make it. It was supposed to be made in Wales. It's gone to France because their government bent over backwards and did whatever it took to make sure that that building opportunity went to France, not to Wales. And we have got to make ourselves, just like the Victorians did, whatever the challenge, we will meet it head on and we will succeed. And making ourselves attractive to investment has got to be the number one thing. Infrastructure, David mentioned about infrastructure. I completely agree with this. I spent a good few months of my life down in South Wales. And I just can't believe, for people who live in North Wales, we have no idea how horrendous it is getting around in South Wales. The valleys are all cut off, you know, and you get snowfall, you can't go over them. Why in the heck don't we just have big visions of buying our own tunneling equipment and building tunnels throughout all of the valleys? Why is it that we don't do these things which we need to make people's lives actually better? Look at the M4, the nightmare of the M4. Well, people might not be aware, but Elon Musk has set up a boring company. He's called it the Boring Company, making tunnels to help out with these things. Why don't we say to Elon Musk, make your first tunneling project underneath the M4? You know, we've got to think big. We've got to attract people here, and we've got to make it so that, you know, as Dr. Beech said, it ain't the big companies that employ people. It's the small people. It's the, I was a small person who employed 150 people. You know, we were the ones that remortgaged our houses several times in order to keep businesses afloat, in order to do these things. And I just really, really want to see a forward-thinking a government in Wales that actually deserves the people, because we, the people, voted for Brexit. Wales voted for Brexit. We had that vision. We had that belief. We now need a government that shares that belief.
That's fantastic, Nathan. Great to hear so much positivity. Question 1 from Joe Ventra. Does the Welsh nationalist movement's refusal to accept Brexit represent a fundamental disconnect between their campaign and the mood of the Welsh public? So first of all, I think I'll go to a thorn in the side of the Welsh nationalists, and that's David Jones.
I think that, of course, it does. It's quite interesting, as you quite rightly say, Matt, that despite having all the vested interests in Wales, quite apart from the rest of the United Kingdom, pitching as hard as they possibly could for Wales and the rest of the UK to remain in the European Union, the people of Wales voted more enthusiastically than the UK as a whole for us to leave the EU. I think that, look, let's be entirely frank about this. Most nationalists are people such as us. We actually believe in the British nation. We believe in the Welsh nation as part of the British nation. But Welsh nationalists, Plaid Cymru and the SNP, are not nationalists as we would recognise them. Far from wanting Wales to be an independent country, they want Wales to be submerged into this ultra-bureaucratic entity, this anti-democratic entity called the EU. Now, how that can possibly chime with what people voted for in 2016 beats me. But that's entirely fine by me. If they want to carry on ploughing their lonely furrow and saying that Wales should remain part of the EU when we actually left the EU almost 12 months ago, that's fine. They quite clearly are detached from reality. But I think that most sensible people in Wales who voted for us to leave the EU will realise that Plaid Cymru is very much a minority pursuit politically in Wales. It's quite quaint. Let them carry on doing that. But the fact is that most people in Wales are delighted at what happened in 2016.
Absolutely. And Dr. Beech, I know you've got a bit of an outside perspective on this sort of topic, so it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this.
Sure. I lived in Wales for 4 years. I'm a graduate at the University of Wales, Aberystwyth. I did an undergraduate and a master's degree there, and I was there at the time of the devolution referendum. So I have a little bit of a more understanding than most kind of English academics, but no, I take your point. I think one of the things that's very interesting, I completely concur with what David has said about Plaid. I think one of the most interesting things is that the problem for the Welsh Labour Party is that they haven't fully understood the warnings of a previous generation of Labour politicians, especially Labour left politicians like Tam Dalyell and Robin Cook and others, that actually saw the integrity of the Union as the best possible deal for Wales. The integrity of the United Kingdom, the Union of the United Kingdom, as the best deal for Wales and the best place, the best place for Wales, because I think they haven't kind of understood that fully. And I think the reason why they haven't understood that fully, I think it goes back to the late 1980s, and it goes back to the period when the European Union changed. The step change away from being purely a trading bloc came into being more of with the vision of a social Europe and more of a kind of a European social democratic view to try and get social safety nets, a different type of capitalism, different forms of intervention. And I think the Labour movement and the economically centre-left nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales, even though the ones in both nationalist parties in Scotland and Wales also had back in the day, quite conservative wings as well. they have viewed the membership of the EU as a way to try and circumvent what they saw as conservative dominance throughout the 1980s and 1990s. And so I don't think that they've really given up sufficiently on the battle. And I think that's the problem for them, that the vast majority of the British people accept Brexit now. Yes, it was a reasonably small majority, but people spoke clearly with a voice, and not purely just merely for economic reasons, as we've set out earlier. So I think the problem for Plaid and the problem for the Welsh Labour Party is one of denial of the political reality, and I think they have to move on. They have to try and make their case now that we are fully out of the EU. I might just say one thing. I think it is important to flag up that Wales will have to compete against other areas of the United Kingdom for this inward investment. That's important to say that. I'm all for the positivity, and I'm a Eurosceptic, and I think it's very positive for the United Kingdom in general and Wales in particular. But, it's not necessarily going to always be the sunny uplands. There is going to be internal competition for foreign investment, and that is where you need advocates in the Senedd. You need advocates like you have in David Jones in the British government, saying why Wales is well suited and well placed. And I also would say the problem of Wales is not unique. I mean, the problem of insufficient mathematics and technical education is the same across England as well. The lack of apprenticeships. I mean, I think we need about 3 million apprenticeships across the United Kingdom. I really think we do. I think we need, dare I say, fewer people going to universities doing certain type of subjects, although most academically rigorous subjects yield good, well-paid jobs. I think we need many apprenticeships as well. So yes, that's all I just add there.
Thank you. And we actually have a question coming up soon, which is regarding the Senedd and how they can compete for this sort of investment internally. Nathan.
So I actually think that Plaid Cymru, David said that they're nationalists and like us, they've got faith in their country and so forth. I actually don't think that they do. I think that they're cowardly in a big respect, in the fact that they are using the EU as a crutch, because they don't really believe that Wales can be independent. And Plaid Cymru has a problem right now that those members who do believe that are leaving them and are going to Yes Cymru, who are a lot more pragmatic and a lot more, dogmatic and a lot more pro independence. Now, on the day of the referendum, I went to vote, and as I was walking into my polling station, a lovely old couple stopped me to say that they had just voted to leave the EU. And I said, well, that's wonderful. Thank you ever so much. And they said, well, not for the reasons that you want. And I said, oh, they said, yes. They said, we're Welsh nationalists and we want to leave the EU because we know Wales could never be an independent country unless we left the EU. And I think that is Plaid Cymru's problem. They don't really believe that Wales can be independent, because if they did, they wouldn't want to tie themselves to a project that has failed, is failing massively, is now only 15% of world GDP and decreasing by the day. And I think that they would have a lot more faith in Wales and the Welsh people, like what we do.
Thank you, Nathan. This next question is from someone who doesn't want to be named, so we'll call them anonymous. What tangible benefits do the panel believe the UK will feel from the actual Brexit deal that's been secured? Mr. Beech.
Well, I think one step before that, the tangible benefit is the United Kingdom has always been a net contributor in terms of as a dues paying member, as the Americans would say, to the EU. So we're not sending that money to the EU. So that's more of that money for our own concerns, our own communities, our own public services. So I think that's the first thing. I think secondly, this deal is, whilst not perfect, no deals are perfect, it's a good deal. It's a good deal in terms of trade. Yes, the majority of our economy is services, but in terms of trade, I think this is the fact that, as David alluded to, the very clear point. This is, quota free, tariff free, and I think that is excellent. That, I mean, we were told even 6 weeks ago. Well, it was 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, we were told this is not going to happen, and so by a lot of people in the press. So I think that's incredibly positive, because that basically means jobs and continued continuity of business supply. So that is very important. I mean, I think straight down the line. And I think the third thing is we get to make our own trade deals. We get to determine, we think about our own competitive advantage in a global economy, and we think, right, we want to do a trade deal with America and with India. We have to do a trade deal with China. Of course, that raises a whole range of questions, but we have to do a trade deal. We've got one with the EU. They're the big four for us. And we're able then to sculpt and shape our economic destiny in a way we weren't able to, because we had to abide by club rules when we were in the European Club.
Okay, thank you. David?
Well, tangible, of course, begs the question, what do you mean by tangible? I actually think recovering your own sovereignty and being in charge of your own destiny is a pretty tangible benefit. But what I would say also, as Matt has quite rightly said, is that we will immediately save the 9-10 billion pounds per annum net that we were putting into the EU budget. And we, instead of spending money on Romanian roads, we can spend that money on filling Welsh potholes. We can actually start looking for new trade opportunities around the world. An important advantage that a single independent nation has when it comes to striking free trade agreements is that you've only got to worry about yourself. I remember when I was a minister in DEXU, I used to go every month to the European Council. And one month I went to Luxembourg, where we were waiting to ratify the CETA, the Canadian free trade deal. And all these Europe ministers were gathered in this room, waiting for the Belgian foreign minister to come back and confirm that the Wallonian Parliament had agreed to us signing the deal. Bear in mind that by this stage, 7 years had elapsed before we'd arrived at this point. And in the end, we all had to give up after drinking innumerable cups of coffee, because the Belgians simply couldn't get the Wallonians to agree to it. And we decided to go home. And as I was walking out of the conference chamber, I heard one EU minister say to another, "Where is Wallonia?" But the point is, frankly, and with all due respect to the Walloons, an obscure sub-regional parliament in Belgium had the capacity to hold up an important free trade agreement with the Canadians. We don't have to worry about that. We're not one of 28, we're just one. And the fleetness of foot that we will recover as a consequence of being an independent nation again should mean that more free trade agreements of that sort will be quite easily struck. And I think that that will be a tangible benefit economically for the whole country, not least for Wales, because we will have markets right around the world that we can pursue, and we will not be confined to what we are told we can trade with by Brussels.
Fantastic. And Nathan?
So I think the biggest Brexit dividend that we're immediately feeling, it might not be tangible as in something that you can feel, but we can see and feel it, is the fact that the Brexit wars are over, that the nation can heal, that 47 years of half of the nation feeling that we'd made a big mistake and half the nation giving it its best shot, and then all of the years and years of political Groundhog Day. I mean, it was just awful, wasn't it? I mean, it's over. We're done. We can heal as a nation. We can get together now, forward thinking, and more importantly, we can start to diverge. And I think this Brexit deal, it's not perfect. There are things in there that I'm not happy about. But I'm just happy about the fact that the Brexit wars are over, and we will now start to diverge from the EU. And as each week and each month goes by and we start getting further and further away from them, we will never return. and other nations within Europe will follow our lead. Of that, I am sure.
That's a really great point, Nathan, actually. And we have two more questions. First of all, is going back to something Dr. Beech touched on earlier. How important is breaking the one-party rule that has plagued the Welsh Assembly/Senedd since its inception in terms of unlocking Wales's true economic potential, and how do we actually achieve it? So I'll go back to you, Nathan, if you don't mind, first of all.
No, not at all. I mean, you mentioned I was elected as a member of the Welsh Assembly, which is now the Senedd, the Welsh Parliament. And I was an AM for almost 2 years, and I really did not enjoy it. I did not like it one bit. It was Groundhog Day. It was like the Vicar of Dibley on speed. It was, we would go there and we would hear the same debate about the exact same things, week in, week out. Most of the things we debated were not even devolved. You know, we were debating Brexit one heck of a lot. It was just awful. And of course, the Labour Party knew that come what may, whatever happened, they were going to be in power, because even if they didn't get the numbers that they needed, Plaid Cymru will go into a partnership with them, or Kirsty Williams did this time, you know, Lord David Ellis Thomas, to secure their government. They're secure. So how do we break this one-party state? And I think what's happened is, as the years have gone by, people have actually discovered that they don't have to vote the same way that their great-grandparents voted. You know, I remember years ago knocking on doors and people saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, mate, I'm voting Labour." "Oh, really? How come?" "Oh, because my dad voted Labour." And it'd be like, what? You know, seriously? But that was the mentality. But now people have voted for other parties. People voted for Brexit. People voted Conservative, you know, in areas that you think to yourself, is this real? Have they really, you know, Wrexham and Anglesey that has been blue before, but Anglesey went as well. And, you know, but this shows that actually, hopefully, people will now start voting for their country and not just for party. And I think hopefully we can see a reform, you know, I want to steal a word, but a reform of the electoral system in Wales, because it, you know, okay, so devolution won. We voted for devolution, but we had no idea what it was going to be. Nobody knew what it was going to look like. Tony Blair rushed this through in '97 because he was pretty sure we was going to be in the EU forever, so he didn't care if he devolved fishing and farming and things like that, because Europe actually controlled it all. So what the heck, you know, let the Scots and the Welsh have, and he created a system that would always have somewhere in the United Kingdom a Welsh government. It was quite clever, really, what he did. But I don't think that it's fit for purpose. Having been a member and having gone there, I can say that hand on heart, that actually it's a nonsense. The ministers aren't held to account. The government's not held to account. They're able to do whatever they want. And hopefully the people will start to wake up to this. And it's only due to the people voting against this that we can see a real change. And I think that, I'm not 100% sure the stats, but Welsh Assembly elections, 47% turnout, something like that. Really low turnout, awful. But I suspect that the turnout this time around is going to be pretty high in comparison, 60%, something like that, because people have now got a reason to vote. And I think a lot of Conservatives, we know it was the Conservatives who didn't vote in these elections. I think a lot of Conservatives are now going to actually come out and vote in this election. So maybe this one-party state, you know, we're going to see another coalition, but then hopefully the time after that, we might see a real change for Wales.
And do you think the election in May will be delayed, Nathan? Because I know that the media are muting that.
Yeah, so for a long time, I was pretty sure it was definitely going to happen. There was no way they could justify delaying it. We've had elections in America, Ukraine, you know, countries all over the world have had elections with no problems and no spikes in COVID cases. But actually, I think the writing is on the wall. Look at the way that everyone's talking. It looks to me very much like it will be delayed, probably September, October time. They can delay it up to 6 months. The legislation's been passed. So yeah, unfortunately, because I think we need an election. It's just awful, you know. We've been denied so much of our liberties. Whether you agree with that or not is irrelevant. We have been denied a lot of our liberties, and now we've been denied the ballot box as well. I just think it's awful.
Okay, and same questions to you, David.
Well, the fact is that Wales has been a one-party state, and that party has been called variously Labour, Plaid Cymru, and Lib Dem, because they've all been in coalition with one another at various stages throughout the lifetime of the Assembly, never the Conservatives. And in fact, the big thing that unites Labour, Plaid, and the Lib Dems is their hatred of the Conservative Party. I think that it's very clear, as we were discussing just a few moments ago, that but all those three parties are well out of step with the Welsh people politically. That was demonstrated by the referendum. The referendum made it absolutely clear that the people of Wales wanted to leave the EU, and all those parties wanted to remain in the EU. I think the important thing is that we should not see a fragmented right in Wales anymore. It's really important that the right should speak with one voice. I mean, clearly we stand a pretty good chance, I think, of getting many more seats in the next Welsh Assembly Senate elections. But that chance will be depleted significantly if the right in Wales is fragmented, and that's something that we need to avoid. It's very important too that the Welsh Conservative Party should be a radical Conservative Party of the sort that we're seeing manifesting itself in Westminster at the moment. We want, if people vote Conservative, they don't want Labour light, they want the Conservative Party, and that's what they should be voting for. And just to return to the UK Internal Market Act, I mean, this is a seriously important piece of legislation. And one of the things that the Conservative Party could demonstrate is that that is the party that gets things done. Those of you who live in South Wales will know that the Welsh Government has been messing about with the Newport Relief Road for so long that everybody has forgotten when the project started. They've actually abandoned the project on one occasion. It's very important that the M4 should be a proper road that is not subject to that dreadful bottleneck at the Brink Glass tunnels. It's quite clear that the Welsh Labour government is completely incapable of doing anything about that bottleneck. We have the powers now under the Internal Market Act, and we should utilise them. And we should actually impose, if necessary, that road upon the Welsh government and say, if you won't do it, we will do it for you. And to be quite frank, the Welsh travelling public don't give a hang whether that's delivered by Mark Drakeford or Boris Johnson, provided, of course, that they can actually get about South Wales, which at the moment they can't. And that's what I mean when I say we should be radical. If we have the powers, we should use them, ideally in concert with the Welsh government. But if the Welsh government is an obstruction to economic development in Wales, then we should do it ourselves.
Great points there. And Dr. Beech.
Thanks. Not much else to add. Where opposition parties see themselves as the opposition for decades long, stretches of time, partly because of electoral systems, partly because of competition, partly because of political or social coalitions that stand against them, makes things very tricky. But I guess a few things that kind of come to mind. Those type of opposition parties need to build grassroots, a very effective grassroots membership. They need to find new members. As David has alluded to, they need to build fences with other parties so that their vote is not diluted or split. They need to have a very clear and distinctive brand, and they have to have leadership that not only can bring out their base, but actually can form some kind of social coalition.
Great, thank you, Dr. Beech. I've just got one other question, which I'd like a very brief response from you all on. I think it's a bit of a curveball, but it's quite an interesting one. Having escaped federalism and regained sovereignty, how much of an invasive threat do we now face from both China about the fourth industrial revolution? David, would you like to start off?
China is a huge worry. I mean, this is going to be the Chinese century, we're told. I visited China a few years ago, and the thing that impressed me was that they had one limitless or almost limitless commodity that we in the West don't have, and that is people. They've got this vast population who, frankly, are prepared to work for very low pay and who are very dedicated to the work ethic. And that is the big threat that we've got. China, of course, is worryingly authoritarian. We're seeing at the moment that despite their economic advances, they are not loosening up in terms of the repressive authority that they exert over their people. We even see, for example, at the moment, Jack Ma, who is the president of Alibaba, a billionaire, and he made some mildly critical comments about the Chinese government a few weeks ago, and he's not been seen for a month. Goodness knows where he is. Someone is inconveniently trying to ring me. We do have to be extremely careful about the rise of China. We have to be vigilant. We have to bear in mind that they do have a program of world domination. That Belt and Road Initiative is a prime example of that. I think that we should be prepared to trade on good terms with China, to treat with China diplomatically, but we should never, ever give up our vigilance about China, because if we do, I'm afraid that they will, as Khrushchev once said, bury us.
Okay, Dr. Beech.
Yeah, China has to be necessarily both our partner and our adversary. Has to be an economic partner because of the sheer economic clout, its manufacturing reach, its significance in terms of not just economic and diplomatic soft power it has now and right across all global organizations. Think of the WHO, think of the OECD and others. Has to be our economic partner. We need to trade with China. But we also have to be very aware that it is a cyber security threat. It is a threat about intellectual property, and absolutely it has the most disgraceful human rights record. Persecution of Uyghur people, Chinese Muslims, the dreadful imprisonment of up to 70,000 Christians, more than that actually, and persecution of its Christian church, which from 2012 had face recognition put and cameras put into churches. It's complete disregard for the liberties of Hong Kong Chinese people, and so we have to be very aware of this. What one can do is a different thing. We can argue and we can shine a light. And I'm a kind of a mix of I'm kind of a realist / idealist when it comes to international relations. I think we want to trade, because if you trade with people and you bring people closer together, you're less likely to have ill relations with other states. States that trade together are less likely to go to war. So that's very positive. That's what we want, trading, partnership with China. But we have to be aware and we have to call out their human rights abuses, and we have to be very vigilant. They look like they were going to be, about 20 years ago, real forces for reform within China. Students who were coming into political and professional position who had been student protesters around the period of Tiananmen. Well, if that had happened, I think a lot of them have actually, we've not heard from. And so I am greatly concerned about the Marxist People's Republic of China. But I constantly say to my students, we speak, we have free speech, we trade, and we have to engage with people, especially China, in all international institutions, but one has to be vigilant because they're a partner and an adversary.
Thank you. Some very good points there. Nathan?
My first point is we haven't left a federalist group. The EU is not federalist. Federalist is like America, where you have states that have a lot of powers. The EU was actually centralist, and it was designed to take powers away from the nation state. That's my first point. And secondly, it kind of I was thinking whilst David and Matt were speaking about the fact that up until 1945, the two most military nations on the planet were Germany and Japan. You know, they were absolutely, they were just all about war and people in uniforms and that kind of thing. And now these are two of the most pacifist countries in the world. And how did we do that? And it was through trade, through business. You know, the American army set up Sony, and Sony is now one of the biggest corporations in the world. They are not going to go to war with the world because they're too busy trading with the world. And I agree with what Matt said about the fact that really China, we need to be aware of who they are and what they're about, what they are trying to do around the world with military bases, Huawei, what they are doing to their own people. But at the same time, I think if we are trading with them in such a strong way, why would they ever want to go to war with us? Why would they want to risk that? I see that the EU is in the final stages of creating a trade deal with China, and they've turned a blind eye to what they are doing to their own people. Very hypocritical, unbelievable what they are doing in Brussels right now. This is an opportunity for them to actually be world leaders and say, you know, stop imprisoning and stop re-educating your own people. But you know, the dollar speaks much more than their principles. Britain hopefully will not be like that. I think that we need to trade. I think that we need to use this opportunity now to start bringing home some of our own production, where our companies have offshored to China, either bring it back to Britain or take it to a Commonwealth country, take it to India, take it to somebody else who we can, you know, have good links with. Why don't we encourage that? Why don't we encourage our companies to do that kind of thing? So we're not so dependent on China, but we can still continue to trade. One of the things that as Brexiteers we said we wanted to trade with the entire world. We want free trade deals with the entire world. We truly believe that, and we're not saying the entire world minus one. But at the same time, there are very big worries about Hong Kong, about the Uyghur, about the naval bases that the Chinese are putting all over, about the fact I was in Ghana a few years ago, and everywhere you went, there was Chinese signage. Farms had been taken over by Chinese people. They really are expanding on a huge scale in a way that, you know, would put colonialists to shame, quite frankly. And I think that we just need to be aware of that. But trade is king.
Thank you, Nathan. We'll be wrapping it up here, everyone. Sorry we've gone slightly over, but I just want to say thank you to our brilliant panelists who've really given us all a bit of an education tonight and given us all much more of an insight into a wide variety of topics from devolution to the EU and a little discussion on China. My next event is on the 27th of this month. It's at 7 p.m. and we'll be discussing devolution. Has it been a success or failure, or has it been both? We'll find out then. So all of you that are subscribed to us will be getting a newsletter with that event with the details this week. So thank you all for attending this evening, and I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.